Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Today I thought I'd have a look at something that was raised by a Facebook post, and I'll just bring it up here. I've got names blotted out to sort of protect everyone because I'm not trying to call anyone out here, but it's an interesting legal topic. It says, anyone on here load 12 or 20 gauge rock salt shot? So that raises some questions. What are the legalities of rock salt shot? And so that would be a shotgun shell that is loaded instead of with lead with rock salt. So extremely painful to get shot with. Now let's have a look here as to first the regulations prescribing certain firearms, etc. These are the laws that say that things are restricted or prohibited, or at least one place where it might say that. So let's look at the ammunition section first. And that tells us section 1 here is handgun ammunition that is designed, manufactured, or altered so as to be capable of penetrating body armor. And they give some examples here. So armor-piercing handgun ammunition. The reason why they specify handgun ammunition is that rifle ammunition tends to be much better at puncturing through armor just because it's bigger and faster. And so they didn't want to ban, for instance, hunting rifle ammunition. Subsection 2 is anything that is designed to, or otherwise modified, etc., to ignite on impact, so incendiary ammunition. Subsection 3 is explosive ammunition. I'm not familiar with rock salt exploding, so doesn't seem to cover either of those. And any cartridge that is capable of being discharged from a shotgun, sounds good so far, and that contains projectiles known as flechettes or any similar projectiles. Well, rock salt is nothing like flechettes, so I don't think we need to worry about any of that. However, there is something that comes up here that that I wonder about, and I'm not actually going to be able to give a firm answer on this one because it's a bit of a weird question. This is one that I think a court would struggle with. Now, when a lawyer says that a legal issue is interesting or weird or something the court's going to grapple with, you should read that as expensive. Because, that means that the lawyer is going to have to do a lot of legal research, which costs you money. There may be more than one level of trial because there may be appeals of the decision. Either you win and the other side appeals, or you lose and you appeal. And that's expensive. And there may be multiple days of argument spent on this. Also expensive. So whenever you hear, that this is an interesting legal question, as a lawyer, I love interesting legal questions. Fascinating. As a client, like if you're the client, you're the accused, you would not want to be involved in an interesting legal question because, you're paying all the costs and you wear all the risk. If the lawyer loses, well, lawyers win some and you lose some, and you have to be able to deal with both. Maybe at worst it's a bit embarrassing, but the lawyer goes home, and the lawyer, if they're a gun owner, gets to keep their guns. You maybe not so much on the going home, maybe not so much on the keeping your guns. And so, it's a really bad place to be. But let's have a look here at what I'm talking about. So this is Former Prohibited Weapons Order number 1, and it covers any device designed to be used for the purpose of injuring, immobilizing, or otherwise incapacitating any person by the discharge therefrom of tear gas, mace, or other gas, or any liquid, spray, powder, or other substance that is capable of injuring or immobilizing or otherwise incapacitating any person. Now, when you see other substance, that's very broad. And so the first thing is, well, doesn't a shotgun shell normally, when it's firing lead, doesn't that injure another person? The problem is with that interpretation, this section doesn't seem to be intended to cover shotguns. When they specify things like tear gas, mace, or other gas, or liquid sprays, powders, they're giving us an idea of what sort of thing they're considering. And so this appears to be, this section is designed to capture things like, tear gas, pepper spray, that kind of thing. But rock salt might qualify under that because the point of shooting rock salt is that it's painful for the recipient, which might, immobilize or otherwise incapacitate them, or at least deter them. So I don't really know about this section in the sense of, does rock salt qualify? That's an open question that would be an expensive question because it's an interesting question. The next aspect to it is, Is ammunition itself a weapon? And again, that's an interesting question that the court would have to sort out. I don't have an answer for you at this stage, but I don't want to be the person looking at getting an answer. In the criminal code, there's nothing that explicitly says that it can't, but there's nothing that explicitly says that it can either. So this is the sort of question that a court would have to sort of struggle with and determine where they wanted to land on this one. And I would not want to be facing this. So I'm not going to be making any rock salt ammunition anytime soon. I recommend, you may want to steer clear of this. It's just not a great place to be. But let's stop for a second and let's assume that it's legal. Just for the purposes of argument, I don't know if it is or isn't here, which tells you something about our laws. A lot of the time you can get to a place where the answer is maybe, but that's an issue with law generally, not just in Canada. That applies in lots of places, that there's sort of unclear places in the law. But let's assume, sort of for the sake of argument, that it is legal. The question then becomes, what are you going to do with this stuff? Because if it's legal, there's no problem, shooting a stump or a target or anything like that in a place where it's lawful to discharge the firearm and in a fashion that is safe and so forth, so that we're not running into other laws there. But if you want to actually use it for anything sort of useful, we run into real problems. Because if you shoot an animal with this, you're probably looking at, cruelty to animals issues. You're looking at, harassing wildlife issues. So that's no good. And if you shoot a person with it, oh man, that's much worse. And the reason for that is, as a starting point, pointing a firearm at another person is illegal. And your justification for that, your exception to that is if you've got some lawful justification or excuse. And usually that justification or excuse is, I was in fear for my safety. I needed, this weapon in order to defend myself against the scary person. That person had a knife or whatever else, and so I was afraid. Now, the problem with that is that you're going to convince a judge or a jury that you weren't if you start futzing around with, novelty ammunition that isn't designed to really stop a threat. I was really afraid of this guy, so I decided to bring out my ammunition that I didn't think would do much other than, cause him some stinging pain and maybe scare him a bit. At that point, it seems like you were going out to cause the guy some hurt as opposed to being afraid for your safety. The other thing is, I don't really know the ballistics of rock salt, and I suspect that the ballistics of rock salt are something that can change over time. For instance, you pack your rock salt into a shotgun shell, it gets a little bit of moisture and goes from being sort of particulate rock salt into being one solid block. If you're saying, I'm going to shoot somebody in a situation where you don't really want to kill them, well, you run the risk that you don't know what this projectile is going to do, and it might kill them. You should never be firing a firearm at somebody if it's not a situation where you're okay, or at least willing to accept the risk that they're going to die. The whole point, safety rules. Never point the firearm at something you are not willing to destroy. Well, the whole idea of the rock salt is that you're not trying to destroy whatever it is you're shooting at. You're violating, basic safety rules with that. And, those safety rules shouldn't just be considered safety rules in the sense of not harming people, but they're also safety rules in the sense of not going to jail for a long, long time. Because, if you see somebody stealing your car and you just lean out the window and blast them with rock salt, well, if that rock salt comes out as one solid pellet and, smashes their skull, you should expect that you are going to be spending, a good decade in a very small room, looking at the outside only through, a window that you can't open. So this is a really bad idea. This is not something I would want in my house. This is not something I'd want in my gun. It occurs to me as well, if you actually were in a life or death situation, the last thing I want to be doing is reaching for ammunition and accidentally loading my gun with rock salt. Because if you actually do need to stop somebody in a hurry because somebody, has shown up, they're wearing a hockey mask and they've got a chainsaw and they're sawing down your door. So an extremely unlikely scenario, but if we assume this is happening, do you really want to accidentally shoot them with rock salt? Because A, you risk your own life doing that, and B, you have now maybe convinced the court that you didn't think you were in danger, because why would you shoot them with rock salt if you thought that they were actually going to chainsaw you? So I think this is a terrible idea. I don't want rock salt ammunition in my house just because I don't know if it's banned or not. And I certainly would never want to fire it at a person because there is no way that works out well for you. Don't do it. I know I'm being a bit of a buzzkill here, but unfortunately that's kind of the way our firearms law works. If something sounds like fun, it's probably banned. If you see somebody on YouTube doing something and you think, hey, that's neat, I want to try that, probably banned up here. That's just the way of things. This is a situation where, there's legal risk involved in making this kind of ammunition, and the reward for doing so is more legal risk if you do anything with it. So I can't recommend anybody do this. This seems like a bad idea, unfortunately. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if this has been informative, even if you don't like the result, because I don't necessarily like the result. It seems to me that our laws sometimes capture things that maybe weren't contemplated, but I don't want to be the person who ends up finding out in a court case. But I want to thank my Patreon supporters at the $50 level: D-Mo, People of Canada, Sir Daniel Wicks of Alberta, Canada's National Firearms Association, Toronto Airsoft, and Renji Malarkey. At the $20 level, Cameron Johnson, Kevin Fleet, and Dale Nesbitt. And at the $10 level, my buddy Keith, Process Eng, Stephen Larson, General Counsel of the CCFR, John Robinson, TR, Roy Haddock, Freckles-Dack, Jean-Alexandre Tessier, Sir Goat, Sights and Arms Limited, Chaba Hollow, Peter H., Craig Kwan, Akin Coxall, North Central Process Service, Toys Are for Boys, Ian Vaughn, Milan Vrekic, Terrence Griffiths, Doug Thompson, Mark D., Brad Crooker, Jason Harrington, Lee Kiso, Mark Stout, Michelle Stotzel, Scott Sweetman, Mike Rhodes, DF, Stacey Cartmell, Tactical Advantage TV Canada, Ian S., Dave Leslie, Juan, Donald Duncan, Darren Duell, Sean Crane, Ian Hutchinson, Rory, Travis, BC Bushcraft Leather, John Singarty, Misako Marivich, All Systems Go, David Moga, Ian Hedge-Danek, Hello from Venezuela, Taylor Delnea, Rod Guzman, Matthew Nesbitt, Conway Yuri, James Cox, Zip Ties and Bias Plies, who I owe an apology to because I found out this is a YouTube channel, and checking it out, they're hilarious, so go check them out. And another thing that it sort of occurred to me, I don't know if I mentioned it before, I'll mention it now. Some people were saying, well, along with the rock salt, you should throw in some cayenne pepper. And that very much increases the chance that a court would find this to be a prohibited, item. So I would definitely not recommend that. Basically, throwing in something along the lines of, you don't want to put in any cayenne pepper. You don't want to put in steak spice. You don't want to put in, lemon pepper, anything like that. Just a bad idea overall. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope this has armed you with knowledge.